Um, well, I hope everyone enjoyed the breakouts, and we'll have a chance at the end for everyone to put some of the takeaways in the chat, or sorry, in a form, but you are welcome to put some in the chat now if you would like. And we're gonna now get into our mini panel, and it's lined up featuring 3 fantastic speakers from across the state, and I'm gonna introduce you to them and then ask them a few questions. Liesl Eathington has worked as a research scientist in the Department of Economics at Iowa State University since 1998. She studies economic trends in Iowa and the Midwest, including population growth and migration, labor force and industry composition, retail trade patterns, and other indicators of regional growth and decline. Evette Creighton is the Senior Manager of Talent, Inclusion, and Diversity at Transamerica and was just in my breakout room. She's worked at Transamerica for more than 13 years and lives in Cedar Rapids. In her role, she provides strategic direction and oversight to inclusion and diversity, talent review, and performance management. And Tyler Peschong is now the owner of MTownProud Insurance after working in a few capacities for State Farm in the Midwest. He grew up in Marshalltown, and as the namesake of his business alludes to, he's a proud Marshalltonian and frequently a motivational speaker for young people and business leaders alike. So as you can see, we have a great mix of experts, and I'm going to start off by asking each of them, what are the top priorities for your area or organization around people and culture? And Evette, I'll start with you.
All right, I think I'm off mute. And just to clarify, I've been with Transamerica for 4 years. I've been in talent management related roles for about 13 years or so. First of all, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here and share some thoughts with all of you today. From a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, one of the areas of focus for us really is around our IND strategy. We have just recently relaunched or revamped our strategic pillars around inclusion and diversity. And so we have greater focus in that area today to include things like the environment, the organizational environment and culture within Transamerica. We have 12 employee resource groups that are thriving. So that's an example of some of the areas of focus that we have. And then we're also just looking at making sure that we're flexible as an organization, as we've learned a lot through the pandemic and a number of shifts that have happened that impact people. And so what are the things that we can do, or how can we continue to be agile in meeting the needs of our people as well? I think diversity, equity, and inclusion is a central component of that as well. So I hope that helps to answer your question, Emily.
Great, thank you. And Tyler, same question for you about top priorities you see around people and culture.
Yeah, we would definitely in Marshalltown here fall into the rural communities that are seeing a large increase in non-white immigrants, especially into the workforce. And one of the things one of the great opportunities we talked about is both in our agency and with the community leaders that I get to spend time with is how do we, one, invite and embrace the culture that hasn't been here before, and make it not like, well, you have to adapt to our culture. Is how do we adapt to a new culture, a new way of working, a new way of doing business, and a new way of loving each other, for one, and two is help bridge the gaps. We have a lot of folks that there's a very strong language barrier for a lot of people, so they don't know where to turn for resources that just seem second nature to a lot of us. And so how do we create an environment where the resources are available, that they know that they're available? And so those are great opportunities. We're working very hard to make that reality. As a business owner, I think in my line of work, it starts with having a team and an agency that reflects the world that we live in. And so that's something I hire to and really take a lot of pride in having a cultural staff and agency that can meet the needs of the people that walk in our door every day.
Awesome, thank you. And Liesl, what would you say? I know you're coming at this from more of a data standpoint, but what are some of the key trends we should know about?
Well, I think for the organizations that I work with on campus, which is mostly Iowa State Extension and CIRIS, the Center for Industrial Research and Service, both of those groups are trying to do a better job of providing resources to improve decision-making to help Iowa's communities grapple with these problems that they're facing, because we have to provide the sad dose of reality. Most of Iowa's communities, like 2/3 of them, are continuing to lose population. And so I think the focus that I'm seeing more so in the past 10 years is things like leadership. So for the people that we have left in communities, we're really trying to focus on leadership development. Then also the diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives from the community standpoint and from the organizations, city governments, nonprofits. So both of those aspects, they can be done even if your population is not growing. And I think that's where we're really seeing a shift in focus. There's initiatives like called Shrink Smart to help communities accept the realities that most of them are not going to grow, but how can you maintain and even improve quality of life for these communities, even if they can't add people? How can we make life better for the people who are still there or the new people from different cultures who are arriving?
Got it. And now to talk a little bit about what are some of those barriers that exist with people and culture, and what can the leaders on this call be focused on doing to help address them? And that will go back to you.
All right, I think one of the challenges is a lack of diversity in a lot of circles. I think that makes it hard to attract new individuals to our community. I think it makes it challenging, not just because of lack of that representation, but then often that's reflected in what's offered in the community. And so I think there's great opportunity for us to really consider, what are the cultural offerings, from events to resources to, the commentary earlier on the number of businesses that have started here in our state. How many of them were from women or persons of color and things like that, and how many of them cater to those communities? I think that's something to really be honest with ourselves about and to better understand. I think there's probably great opportunity for us to make some improvements there. Same, also related kind of from a business perspective is, do we have folks who want to stay here in Iowa? Are we seeing that they want to go to other communities, that because they can work remote, that they can go to other states and other communities that have those offerings at their fingertips?
And Evette, just to follow up, I'm curious from your standpoint, doing DEI work within the business world, how does that directly tie with community efforts that are happening with DEI, so that it's business and community working in tandem to make communities inclusive?
Well, I think for Transamerica, again, through our employee resource groups, we have a sort of community focus, and we also have a very strong partnership with our Aegon Transamerica Foundation to give back to the communities, both at a national and local level. And so where we see a lot of engagement from our kind of bridging the gap of, or bridging those connections between our employees and the community, are through things like the Latino Festival here in our community, or Pride festivals, or other events and activities to really help us to engage with the community, really put our brand out there to say that Transamerica is an employer who values diversity, equity, and inclusion, but to make those connections as well, right? So I think that's where we're seeing some of that. The other is through, different committees and organizations that were, boards and organizations that we're involved in that has that community, helps us to kind of get closer to the community and be at the table and making decisions that then also impact communities as well. So I think those are kind of a few areas that I'd say are directly aligned to making those two connections.
Thank you. And Tyler, same question for you. What are some of the barriers you see with people and culture, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, so I mean, so in my previous role with State Farm, I was in agency management. So I hired and promoted agents. And one of the biggest things that I've seen is truly just a lack of representation. And so what that means is, full transparency, I'm a legacy. My father was a State Farm agent. No one aspires to be an insurance agent when they're a 10-year-old, but the NFL stopped recruiting slow guys that can't throw very well. But it was always something in the back of my mind, if things go well, I could maybe do this someday, right? And so I would have a lot of conversations with minority folks, and there was no one to turn to that they could say, that could be me too, right? Like look around. And so one of the things that with that lack of representation, it's just a lack of understanding for people that this could be for me too, right? And I took that for granted my whole life, that this could be something I could do. And so one of my big passions now is that I hired my team and I build out my staff. So I have a Hispanic woman, a Hispanic man as my two sales account managers, is help them understand that this is a beginning of something bigger, right? And I want them to have their face on a billboard someday and have the 10-year-old that I was to look up and say, that could be for me too, right? And that's the opportunity. But we have to understand as business leaders that when they can't look around and see other people that look on billboards right now that look like them, it's going to take more work than it will take for someone like me. I could already believe it. It just was natural for me. If that's not the case, if that's not just natural, if I can't look around and see 10 Latino agents are in my circle, it doesn't seem natural for me. So it's going to take more work, but if we actually believe in something, if we actually want to put work into it, it'll be worth the work. And so that's what excites me about the opportunity now owning my own business. I get to make those decisions and try to create that pathway for folks.
Awesome. And Liesl, what are some of those barriers that you're seeing?
Honestly, after years of participating in initiatives and watching communities, large and small, try and grapple with this problem of Iowa's lack of diversity, I think the biggest challenge is the unwillingness to really be honest, face some hard truths about the state. It's a lot easier and a lot more exciting to say, what can we do different? What can we do that's new? What kind of new festival can we have? It's much harder to say, what are we doing wrong? What do we need to stop doing that is just not working, that is not attracting people who are different than the people that we're used to seeing on the street in Iowa? I don't know, it's difficult because I've seen a lot of initiatives start and they're asking the right questions, but as soon as it gets uncomfortable, it's like the institutions just shut down and they don't want to have that dialogue anymore. So then they go off, they veer off and say, oh, we just need to market better, or we just need to do this different. And I don't know, I think for me, that's the biggest challenge I see.
Mm-hmm. And Evette, do you have something to add on kind of convening the folks to make change in those areas? I think we may have you still muted.
Okay. We don't use Zoom at Transamerica, so I'm kind of figuring this out a little bit. I so appreciate you saying that, because I think, it's not from a lack of some effort, right? I think there's some, I can't remember who shared here in the chat. Jennifer shared ICR. Transamerica is part of our ICR. So one of my team actually sits in on those meetings and is very involved and kind of keeps us up to date and involved. And I've been involved in ICR before I even worked for Transamerica, which is a great organization and does a lot of really, really great work. And I believe there are a lot of organizations across the state probably like that, with intentions of attracting diverse professionals and families to our communities. But I think it's a very real thing for us to ask those difficult questions, not about, having another summit, right? And then also having a summit and expecting that summit to be led by, having a Black summit and expecting the summit to be led and driven by the Black community, right? Like those are things that are important, but it's time for us to kind of take it to that next level. When we are thinking about performers who come here to our communities and perform, are we considering diverse communities and who we invite, right? When we're thinking about attracting, again, back to business owners and really getting them to enticing them to create businesses and opportunities for diverse communities, are we taking those steps? And then when we have conversations like this, are we truly looking around the room and seeing who's represented? And if there's not the voice at the table that's different, there's not very many of those voices, then are we really addressing some of the challenges that we're facing? So, not to beat a dead horse, but I think it's really important for us to really have those difficult conversations, to peel back the onion and ask ourselves, what are we doing wrong, and what can we truly do to make that change happen? And it shouldn't take, things take time. I get that, but there are some small wins that we can probably accomplish in short order as well.
And I want to transition to a slightly different topic, but related to Iowa's population. I know one of the trends we've seen is young folks that have left the state to go to college, or maybe to take a different job. And so, Tyler, I'm curious for you. I know you went to school out of state, worked out of state for a little while. What kind of drove you to come back, and what can other communities kind of be learning from your story when it comes to attracting young people, young families back to the state?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things brought me back. One, I mean, I'm from this area. It's nice. As I started having kids at a rapid rate, I'll save you those details for a different breakout session. But we started having a lot of kids, and it's good to be back, where you're from. But I think for me, it's a cost of living thing. Like, so I could have done my old job from anywhere. My corporate job, I could really have done it from anywhere. I chose to do it in a place that costs about half of the cost of living is half of what it was in Omaha. Not that far away, but rural Iowa, the easiness of life and the cost of living, my money went a lot further. I was able to get way further ahead financially and provide for my family a lot better. And so that was a huge thing for me. I mean, the quality of life in a small community, again, where your money goes further, that's really important to me. And it's just a great, I love that from Marshalltown specifically, I grew up here. Diversity was normal for us. It wasn't like a buzzword thing. It's just kind of how life was. And I always, as I ventured out and realized that the rest of the world doesn't necessarily operate that way. As I raise my kids, I want them to have that same childhood. I want them to experience diversity, live diversity, and like truly embrace it. Because I know it's been said a bunch of times, but it's very much a buzzword, right? And so it's a lot of people talk it. It's a different thing to live it, and I think, and that's where I think we have this benefit in Marshalltown, that we get to live it every day. And so super, super important to me to be in a community that's like that, and have my kids grow up in a place that's like that. So those are the things that brought me back to here. And when I speak to, and I just spoke last week on that same topic of, I've lived in big metropolitan areas. I've lived in kind of mid-size 100,000 communities. But there's nothing like this place to me, just because of all of those things, the opportunity, and just the way that I get to raise my kids. So.
And Liesl, what do you see in research about some of that state to state migration, some of the reasons why folks choose to come back to Iowa, maybe if they have left?
It's really tough sometimes to sort out people's reasons for migration, but we tend to think, they split into two big buckets. It's either employment related or it's family related. I would say probably we like to talk about how much of it is amenity driven. So people go because they like the weather, or they like the mountains, or they like the coast. But I think probably the jobs or the family are going to outweigh that. Cost of living is important, but usually cost of living is kind of tied to wage levels. So you don't often see huge discrepancies between wages and cost of living. They kind of equalize. So I think it's really important to never forget the importance of the jobs in driving migration. People may want to live here. They may, take a poll or do a focus group and say, yeah, I'd love to move to Iowa, but if there's not a job here and they need to be employed, that's going to be key. So that's where the remote work, I think, really is an exciting opportunity, but also a challenge for Iowa.
And Evette, I'll go to you and I'll have each of you answer. What are some of the ideas that you all really want to be highlighting when it comes to just attracting and retaining our population here in Iowa?
I would say from a kind of a corporate perspective, there's a number of things that we're doing. One, kind of back to our employee resource groups, we're looking at ways that we can continue to mature and enhance our employee resource groups to give the individuals who are part of those communities, part of those ERGs, opportunities within the organization, kind of showcasing them as talent, as a talent pool. And I think Liesl mentioned a little bit around like leader development, really investing in them and demonstrating that we value that talent. So I think that's a great area for us when we talk about our internal talent and engaging them in a way that makes them want to stay with the organization. And then, as that impacts where part of Transamerica is located, Cedar Rapids, it also will hopefully engage them to stay in this community as well.
Mm-hmm. And Tyler, what would you say about Marshalltown, some of the ideas there?
Yeah, I say for starters, like, what I can do is, and what I'm trying to do is essentially lead from the back. I'm trying to listen first. Like I said, I built a multicultural team, and I don't come to them with ideas of how we can impact the community. I sit back and ask, right? And then if you truly care, then you'll listen and you'll do something about it. And so where is there a need? Where is there a gap? And then how can we fill that? If you're willing to listen, the ideas will come to you, right? And so that's what I'm trying to do. So a lot of it is coming. The things I've heard is just bringing people together for education, and not necessarily insurance education, because that's really boring for everyone knows that. But just education about the resources that are available for people, how to get the help that you need. I was talking to a community leader the other day. So we have a very large Burmese population in Marshalltown. And 80% of the students showed up on the first day of school and were not registered for school. They just didn't know. And so that the kids show up and they don't know that they're not even in the system or anything like that. So how do we help? But it starts with listening, right? If I don't know that, but if I'm willing to actually take in the information and then develop a plan, that's step one. And I'm 19 days into owning this business again and getting back into small business ownership. But that's what we're doing right now. I'd love to say we've changed the game in 19 days, but it starts with just taking a step back, I think, and leading from the back.
Awesome. Liesl, what would you say?
Two things. I think the first thing, and I think more from a community perspective than a business perspective, but the first thing would be let go of the past. However your community looked or your region looked in the past, success is not going to look that way. And then related to that, I think we need to help our communities reframe what success means. It's going to look different in different parts of the state. Our metro areas, success looks one way. In our rural areas, it's going to look a different way. So I think that we need to really be flexible in how we define what a successful community is.
Awesome. And I want to give you each a chance just to give what's one thing we haven't talked about that you think you want to leave people with. And Evette, will go to you.
I would say I think these conversations are very important to have. It's so important to make space and time to have these discussions, but then we have to take it a step further. What are we going to do? And what are we each going to commit to in order to make our community better, make it more diverse, and to focus on a lot of the things that we talked about in just a few moments.
Awesome. Tyler?
Can I just steal Evette's? No, I mean, I agree. I think it's about action, right? I couldn't agree with you more. The conversations are important, are so important, and every conversation I have, I learn. Right? I was blessed to have a very good childhood and be in the position that I was had. So every time I'm in a conversation around D&I, I'm always learning, and so then you got to do something with the information, right? Like you actually got to, and it doesn't have to be. I think what oftentimes handcuffs people, in my opinion, is that they try to lose 100 pounds in 3 weeks, right? Like we try to take this massive step, and you have to take a step, right? And so what is that step for me? That's going to look different for everyone on this call, but we have to be willing to take that step. And so couldn't agree with you more, Evette. It's about understanding the information to begin with, and then leading it, but however that looks to you, right? And making sure you're making an impact in a way that fits your world.
All right, and Liesl.
Well, so I have spent the last many decades looking at data, population data, job data, whatever data. And so I want to leave people with a caution: don't wait for data to make decisions. I hate that expression, data-driven decision making. You can't ever gather enough data to make a good decision, I don't think, especially on this topic. So I think the conversations on this issue are more important than waiting for 3-year-old census data come out and then making a decision.
Got it. Well, I want to thank the three of you. You all have provided some great insight, and we really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.